It's my feel-good breakfast show.
You're still keeping it locked right here on your Feel Good Breakfast show on SABC3. Today is, of course, Youth Day, but we're also remembering the brave students of 1976 who lost their lives in protest against apartheid, and more specifically, Bantu Education. Now, Bantu Education meant that Afrikaans had to be used as the language of instruction to learners of colour who did not understand the language. What was planned as a very peaceful march turned into a massacre of school children. Now, activist and director at Youth Lab, Pillay, joins us to unpack what this means today. Welcome to the show, Pearl.
Hi guys, thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you, Pearl, because this is such a complex conversation to have, particularly in such a short space of time. But I want to highlight, why is it so important to recognize the role of the youth in the liberation of South Africa from the apartheid regime?
I think, there's generally a sort of dismissive tone when people talk about young people, and particularly young people protesting for freedom, right? But by and large, when we look at liberation movements, whether it's the struggle against apartheid, whether it's things like fees must fall, whether it's community protest, young people are always at the forefront of change. People like saying, young people are apathetic and they only care about their cell phones and their friends and all of that. But I think the apartheid movement, or the liberation struggle especially, gives us very key insight into the fact that young people are very organized, very unapathetic, and very involved in what's going on in society, and that we need to be given credit, for the work that we've done.
And we need to be included in decision-making as well.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we spoke about this earlier as well. We've made such a great progress as a country, but of course now the COVID-19 pandemic has once again exposed, the gulf between the haves and unfortunately the have-nots. How do we go beyond history and acknowledge these current realities?
Yeah, look, I think COVID has just brought out just the staggering inequalities that we already knew we faced, right? But being able to watch it when you need like rapid healthcare responses, rapid education responses, and employment solutions, young people have just been left out of the conversation completely, right? When we talk about things like education, the main comment and the main conversation is, how do we save the academic year? Not about what are young people actually experiencing in the most unequal country in the world during a pandemic. If you're a young woman, you're facing femicide as well. How do you deal as a young person? How do we make decisions without actually bringing young people into the conversation, without actually planning for the people that are meant to inherit this country? And I think we've missed a very, very big opportunity to really create a new kind of system, right? We're talking about the new normal consistently. But what does that mean for young people in this country? And for me, I don't think that, because of the way we've been excluded in our COVID-19 responses, I think that the future that we're looking at in the new normal is going to be even more exclusionary to young people than the current one is.
That just literally I'm taken aback by that comment, that it continues to be exclusionary. When we talk about the new normal, we talk about dismantling current systems that are working against young people, working against trans people, working against black people, or non-white people in any system around the world. But I just want to go back to, the point of COVID-19, because many learners have recently come forward to discuss the realities still faced in classrooms and schools today. And we know that post-94, we are termed as the Born Frees or the Rainbow Nation, but those are problematic terms that can be very dismissive to the realities that we are faced. Can you please unpack why they are so dismissive?
I think the easiest thing to say is, what part of being young in South Africa talks about freedom? Like, what part of not being able to find a job, not being able to afford education, being a young woman walking out in the street, getting killed at home, getting killed when you go to the post office, right? Nothing about the way we live as young people, as young women particularly, tells us that we're free. So to call people born frees dismisses any kind of issue they may have with the current government, right? So someone says fees must fall, and the thing is, well, you born frees, you don't know what it's like to be there in 1976 protesting against Afrikaans, right? And that's not the point. The idea is, if we understand that apartheid is generational, we understand that someone born in 2005 can still feel the effects of something started in the 40s, right? And if that's what we understand, you can't call people born frees. if we just talk about education, right? Young people are born free, but go to schools that don't have toilets or don't have adequate teachers, or learning curriculums about like the Berlin Wall, but not about structural inequality. There's nothing about the way young people navigate South Africa that screams out freedom. And so there's nothing about us that was born free.
Absolutely. You know, Pearl, is there a place where we can continue this conversation? Because also I just want people to get the idea out of we are born free. It's been 26 years of democracy, to get it out of their systems, because how can we undo a system of hundreds of years that was built to work against anyone of our color? Where can we continue this conversation? Where can we get in touch with you? Where can we, you know, help or also include our voices as well?
Great. So I run a very, very lovely organization that does youth work, and we're called Youth Lab. So you can find us on Twitter at YouthLabZA. And if people want to get a hold of me directly, you can find me on Twitter at Pillay.
And maybe in closing, Paul, you can give, you know, a voice of reason and maybe just some advice for the youth.
I think by way of advice, I think we are seeing our generation and the generations that are coming are by far the most vocal generation and has the tools like social media, like the internet, to be able to voice out concerns and frustrations in ways that no other generation has had. And for me, it's about using that to our advantage. How do we collectively organize and fight systems that don't serve us, right? But I think the last thing is to always remember that as young people, we have power. And that power is validating, but also collapsing things that don't serve us. And to stop opting into things that are built to exclude you and find ways of creating our own things, because we're absolutely capable of doing it.
100%. Pearl Pillay, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We hope that you have a fantastic morning further, and happy Youth Day to you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Now, in remembering the youth of 1976, it is important to celebrate how far we have come as a country, but also to recognize that the gulf between the have and have-not still exists. Let's continue to empower the youth and create the change we want to see. And maybe we can check on that with how we can finance the youth with Nedbank.